barely a fortnight after taking over, President William Ruto has conceded the country's economy is in dire straits, with a national debt burden, inadequate savings and a high recurrent expenditure making the situation worse. To mitigate this, the president has directed an immediate reduction of 300 billion shillings from government expenditure in this year's budget, a move that will slash the budget deficit from a high of 900 billion shillings to 600 billion. Ruto also announced plans to reform the Kenya Revenue Authority to make it more responsive and effective, including a change of name to the Kenya Revenue Service. Francis Gachuri on the president's take on the economy.
President William Ruto made his way to Parliament to comply with Article 132 of the Constitution and standing orders of the bicameral Parliament, official opening of the 13th Parliament, whose membership was elected on 9th of August. In the joint sitting of the two houses, presided over by National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula, assisted by his Senate counterpart Amason Kingi, the President rendered his 2,774-word and 47-paragraph speech that heavily centered on the country's state of economy.
I have news, and it is not very good news. Our financial situation is not very good.
The rising public debt stock, inadequate savings, and a high cost of running government were, according to the president, key challenges that must be addressed.
For Kenya to grow to an upper income country, we need to invest at least 25% of our GDP. Our current national savings is below 10% of our GDP, which translates to an investment savings deficit of 15% of our GDP.
Statistics from Central Bank and the Parliamentary Budget Office as at May this year indicating that the national debt burden had hit the 8.6 trillion shillings mark. The 12th Parliament at the tail end of its term had raised the debt ceiling to 10 trillion shillings to cushion the incoming government as it implements the 2022-2023 budget, domestic debt almost at par with foreign debt.
This year alone, we budgeted to borrow 900 billion to finance both development and recurrent expenditure. You're all aware that our total collection is 2.1 trillion, which is only enough to pay debt and to pay salaries. Everything else, we have to borrow.
In the 3.3 trillion shillings budget, projected revenue is 2.4 trillion shillings, leaving a deficit of almost 900 billion shillings that must be plugged through borrowing. The cost of servicing debt in the 2022-2023 financial year hitting the 1.15 trillion shillings mark, a situation Ruto wants reversed immediately.
To this end, I have instructed Treasury to work with ministries to find at least 300 billion shillings in this year's budget so that we can remove it, because the market cannot sustain the kind of borrowing we are doing as government. Next year, we will bring it further down so that by the third year, we have a recurrent budget surplus.
The president outlining to Parliament his plan to reduce government's appetite for domestic debt that complicates the situation for ordinary borrowers seeking credit from financial institutions.
These measures outlined above will also address the problem of government crowding out the private sector from the credit market. It will encourage banks to go back to lending to businesses and also bring down interest rates so that the private sector can also contribute to reducing the savings investment deficit.
And to ensure effective revenue collection, the president told Parliament of a raft of reforms, including a change of name from Kenya Revenue Authority to Kenya Revenue Services.
The economic principle of equitable taxation requires that the tax burden reflects ability to pay. This is best achieved by a hierarchy that taxes wealth, then consumption, then incomes, and lastly trade, in that order of preference. I am committed and determined to ensure that our tax system is responsive to the needs of the economy. It must be equitable, efficient, and customer-friendly.
Ruto hailed the deal struck by Safaricom, NCBA and Kenya Commercial Bank to lower interest rates for Fuliza and Mshwari, as well as relief for over 4 million people blacklisted for defaulting on loans repayment. The president urging Parliament to address in a bipartisan manner proposed legislation and regulations crafted by his administration that will be tabled in the two houses aimed at resuscitating the country's economy. Francis Gachuri, Citizen TV.